brother who plays cello, and my older sister, I guess she was taking piano lessons too. So it was mostly piano. And we had, for sort of a middle class family in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, we had a pretty nice grand piano in our home. I mean, it was, it wasn't a Steinway or anything, but it was, it was important to my parents to have good music in the house.
Well, it's good that you kept it up, and you so Dan semi-professionally plays. All right, so we are live streaming, so I will go ahead and launch my own slides and do a little bit of intro. It is so nice for everybody to be joining us.
Well, I see we're up to 84 already, and it's not on for 5 minutes. So,
wow. All right, so I had an upgrade on my software. Privacy. I wonder, Sue, are you able to launch the slides? They're linked. Are you able to launch the slides? I can put the link.
Yeah, send me the link.
All right. Because I am having a glitch. All right, let me think. Where is my link? Open system. Let me try this one more time. Open system preferences. Yeah. Am I sharing screen already?
No.
All right. I'm not going to try to troubleshoot this live. That is never a good idea. All right. So I'm just going to copy the link. And then I'm going to, is it okay if I put it in the chat, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. Host and panelists. Okay, you should have it. And then you share screen. Yeah, my computer is really good about making me update. It's a Mac, so it just did, and it actually reset all of the privacy things, including Zoom. So I can't share screen without going through some rigmarole. But to go ahead and get started, my name is Janet Callahan. I'm Dean of the College of Engineering, and welcome to Husky Bites. Husky Bites is a free webinar series hosted by Michigan Tech, and we feature a wide variety of subjects, including technical to non-technical to hockey to, you name it. Sue, thank you for sharing screen. Tonight's Husky Bites is sponsored by the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. And go ahead to the next slide, please. All right, so this was taken this weekend. This is the Okundikan Falls, which is north of Bruce Crossing, south of Mass City. I hope that means something to all y'all. And to get there, you take 26 to 45. And so we had a nice snowshoe out there. So I don't know if you can tell what you're seeing. You're seeing a frozen waterfall. It kind of looks like dirty spaghetti, but it was big. It was nice. So I wanted to show you some winter. And we are at 266.5 inches of snow so far, which is not record breaking, but it is not a small number of inches compared with last year. Next slide. All right, so we have some Husky Bitesers. This is Tom and Peggy Lippart. Tom is an alum. Becky and Craig are seen in the distance. They stopped by. They were visiting their daughter Avery, who's up here studying environmental engineering, and they are wearing their Castle Vineyards of Hershey T-shirts because they are vintners, and they are also school teachers. And so I just want to thank you all for joining us. They watch it regularly together every Monday night. And then so when they stop by, I'm like, send me a picture. Next slide. All right, so this is really important. We have no Husky Bites next week. Next week is spring break, so there's no show next week. We return on March 14th We will be hearing from Karen Helt, who is a faculty member in the chemical engineering department. She is also the director of the Health Research Institute. She's and the co-host will be one of her students, Dylan Turpinine, or her graduates, and the subject will be the making of a vaccine. And I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm hoping she weaves into this story this sort of tale or the narrative of how Michigan Tech rallied so quickly to be able to do PCR testing up here in the Upper Peninsula when there was no PCR facility up here. And it was taking us a week or longer for any sort of COVID test to happen. We began doing them on campus, and Karen was a huge part of that. All right, next slide, please. All right, so this is my cue to stop sharing slides, Sue, and I'm going to now introduce my co-host, Dan Fuhrmann. So Dan, there's so much I can say about you, but I'm going to begin with the sort of beginning. Well, he started learning piano at the age of 6. We're going to skip a whole bunch of years. He then earned his Bachelor of Science degree in electrical engineering at Washington University. He then went on to earn MA, MS, and PhD degrees in electrical engineering and computer science at Princeton University. Dan, that's where I went to high school. Not at Princeton University, but Princeton High School. He is the Dave House Professor of Computer Engineering. He is also the chair of our new Department of Applied Computing, which is in our new College of Computing. Dan's research interests lie in statistical, signal, and image processing, including sensor arrays. He is a fellow of IEEE, and I know I could keep going, but I'm going to stop. And I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce our featured speaker this evening, Dan.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Janet. I didn't know I was going to get that level of introduction, but I really appreciate it. I'll start by saying that I was department chair in electrical and computer engineering from 2008 to 2019, which is sort of how I'm connected to Martha. Of course, back in 2008, when I was interviewing Martha, Sloan was just one of many faces in the interview crowd at the time. But after I took the position, after I arrived, I quickly discovered what a special woman she was. She was a voice of experience. I wouldn't say the only voice of experience, since there were quite a few people who had been in the department a long time, but a voice of experience and certainly a voice of reason for me. And I quickly discovered that we really wanted the same things. We want what is best for our students. We want what's best for the faculty and for the ECE department, and we wanted what's best for Michigan Tech. And so, based on that, I think in my second year, Martha, I think appointed you as associate chair of the department, and that was a position that you held until you retired just a few years later, so it wasn't that long. And when Martha retired, then she was almost immediately became Professor Emerita at Michigan Tech, much deserved, and it was that just sailed right through, because everyone knows and everyone loves Martha, and she's still around at Michigan Tech. We see her quite often, and she hasn't really gone anywhere, and we appreciate that. For me, she always was, again, a voice of reason. I always went to her for advice when I had issues in the department, and just always and I treasure our friendship, Martha. So I'm not going to go into a full bio, because I think that's going to be part of the talk we're going to have here, but I think we should get into the talk. So our guest tonight is Dr. Martha Sloan, who has a long history with Michigan Tech and with the ECE department at Michigan Tech. And so I'm just going to ask some questions, and I think your bio will reveal itself as we move along here, right, Martha?
Fine.
So where did you start your college education, and how did you pick your major?
Okay. I started my college education at Stanford and ended up with 3 degrees from Stanford, so I stuck with them for quite a while. The reason I picked electrical engineering had to do with a program I took at Northwestern, a 5-week program the summer before my senior year, called the National High School Institute. And they had, this is sponsored by basically all the STEM departments at Northwestern. And there were about 100 of us. There were 90 some boys, but to my surprise, there were either 7 or 9 of us girls. So this was good for me, because it was the first time that I met other girls that were interested in engineering as a career. So Northwestern exposed us to all their different fields. They'd have hands-on things, and they'd have recent alums talking about what they did, and we had some field trips. It was a wonderful experience. And in the process, I was introduced to AC circuits out of Kirshner and Corcoran, which you will probably remember as the standard text for many, many years at like the sophomore and junior level. Anyway, I thought that was beautiful. Anyway, so I applied to Stanford, which I chose because of its campus, the palm trees and so forth. And but luckily, it was also a pretty good school. At any rate, I had been thinking in high school that I would major in physics, but after I was accepted at Stanford, they said, if you're thinking at all of ever majoring in engineering, start out in it because you can transfer out easily, but if you try to transfer in, you'll probably delay your graduation. So based on my experience at Northwestern, I picked electrical engineering and never regretted it.
Very good. So, and then you went on to graduate school, and I think there were some other things in the after that, right?
Yeah, but there was a period there of about 10 years where I was finding myself right out of my bachelor's degree. Actually, while I was getting my master's degree at Stanford in a program called Honors Co-op, I was working at Lockheed and doing research, communications research. And I liked that. It was challenging, but I found it was very lonely. And then my husband took a job in Germany, and my German didn't allow me to, wasn't good enough for me to be an engineer over there. But by sort of a fluke, I fell into a position teaching science at the 7th and 8th grade level. And that was a lot of fun. And the second year I could improve on what I did the first year, but I could see that pretty soon it would be very repetitive and boring. But at least it satisfied my need for being with people. Then we went back to the States and divorced. I married a man who was on the forestry faculty here at Tech, and I was looking around what to do, thinking of myself at this point as basically a secondary school teacher. But this is a small area and there wasn't any demand for that. So I just on an off chance wandered into the electrical engineering department office. And so at that point I had a master's in electrical engineering plus a year at MIT, which I had not enjoyed at any rate. And this would never happen now because of course the electrical engineering department gets hundreds of applications every year. But that year they had a few vacancies, and this was August, and they had one vacancy that they hadn't filled, and so they hired me on the spot. And
they were desperate. They were
yeah,
like
they were desperate. Yeah,
manna from heaven kind of thing, right? You know.
Yeah. At any rate, it was just great, and so I liked it enough, and that my first year I got some publications, and I got an NSF grant, and they were heads, not chairs, said if you perform at that level, we keep you on without the PhD. This was a time where they were converting to a more PhD faculty. In fact, we had one person with only a bachelor's degree who was a professor. So it was a time of transition, and the men my age were without a PhD were going back and getting it, and I didn't want to be a second-class citizen, so I found a shortcut to getting a PhD, and that didn't have me separated from my second husband for too long, and came back and enjoyed it ever since. The perfect job for me as such.
Well, I'm sure you must have all sorts of interesting stories about Tech and your experience at Tech, just in terms of what Michigan Tech was like in the early 70s, and also what your experience was like as the first woman faculty member in ECE at Michigan Tech. What can you tell us about that?
Okay, well, let's take the story about the first woman faculty member. My colleagues were all very, very nice, but the first day of classes, I was standing for my first class at the at the podium as the students entered, and most of them just came in and sat down. And one guy came in, did a double take, went back, and obviously checked to see that he had the right door, and came in sort of grumbling, I didn't know Tech was hiring any women faculty. And I said, what's your name? And the whole class laughed, and he slunk to the back of the classroom. And I made a point of not remembering who he was, which is easy for me because I'm not good at remembering faces and so forth. But there was that, and then there was the story that just came up. It happened this class. One of the questions that we had been discussing was, did I ever teach a course that I hadn't taken? Well, this class was a class that not only had I never taken, but Stanford didn't even offer it. And actually Tech didn't offer it too much more. It was in something like magnetic circuits that the older faculty thought was extremely important. And I think it was taught for a couple more years, but I figured I can certainly keep a few pages ahead of the students, and I did.
There are probably some faculty members who still think magnetic circuits are important, actually,
I'm
especially
sure,
when you get into electrical machines.
Yeah, oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And indeed,
Yeah.
it was like the power-oriented faculty, of which
Sure.
we had much more, larger proportion than we do now, that thought that was really important.
What was your, so you mentioned getting an NSF grant. What was that first NSF grant for?
It was in NW education. I forget exactly what it was, but the year that I started, we had a brand new head hired from outside who had a very different way look at the department than the established faculty, much as I had a different way of looking at it. But then one of the things this call for proposals came out, and he really talked up everybody that could submitting one. So from our department, there were, I think, let's say 7 of us who applied. And when the results came back, 3 of us had hit. The department head had hit, I had hit, and a senior faculty member who had the habit that I would walk into a room where I belonged, like maybe a faculty meeting room right before the faculty meeting, and this guy would be sitting there saying stupid goddamn females. And I would come in and pretend I hadn't heard it, and everybody else pretended they hadn't heard it. Well, he was the one who got the 3rd one. And when he came to my office and congratulated me, I knew I was never going to hear that going into a room again, and I did.
Wow. Wow. That must have been interesting to be the only woman in a faculty meeting of probably what, 10 or 15 people?
Over 20, somewhere in the low to mid 20s.
Big department.
Yeah, if I ever do a memoir, and I'm thinking of doing one, the title is going to be The Only Woman in the Room, because that was just the story of my early to mid career. I was pretty much all the time the only woman in the room, and you get used to it, and you're happy when you run into a few other women, and along the way, some of them were very kind to mentor me and so forth.
Well, what are some of the ways that you've seen either Michigan Tech or the ECE department change over the years since that time?
Well, I've already mentioned that it's going to be essentially all PhD faculty, and that was a fairly rapid change. And the same thing happened at it was a tiny graduate program when I was first there, and as a result, the faculty banned most of the laboratory sections, and that was a wake up to me, because I'd always been a place where the graduate students were the ones that ran the labs. And with the growth of the graduate program and the addition of the PhD program, I, by the way, wrote the proposal for the department to have a PhD program and shepherded it through the Senate because I was the department senator. So that's that's been it. And then certainly over the years, I've seen a lot more women students. I mean, it used to be that it was lucky if there were two girls in the room, but now it's certainly much better.
So, Martha, we have some students who remember you. For example, John Soering says, hello, Dr. Sloan. It's great to see you again. I took a couple of your classes around 1973, 74.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
And
Okay.
ask questions as we go along. You don't have to wait to the end this evening. So feel free to ask any questions. We have a few more that we've kind of prepared, but at any point, if you have any questions, audience, please feel free to type them in the Q&A.
Right. And two people right in a row asked what year you started. So what was that year when you got hired on the spot?
1969.
1969.
I
Okay.
could also tell my integrating the swimming pool story.
Please do.
Okay. Well, back then, before the SDC, the swimming pool was in what is now Walker. And I learned early on, I met up with a new faculty member in geological engineering who was also a woman. And we learned that at the lunch hour, that the men faculty could swim in the pool, no lifeguard, but they had been issued a key to the pool from the men's room. And we thought, hey, we would like to do that too, a nice way to get exercise at lunch. So there was a problem in that all the men swam naked. At any rate, I remember going to talk to Ted Curley, who was the director of athletics, and this was after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, obviously, and he had no problem at all. He recognized that we had a right. He issued a key to me for getting into the pool from the women's locker room. And so we then made a point of making sure the male faculty were aware of our intentions. We got a lot of pushback. And the guys were saying, you know that we swim naked? And I said, we're going to be wearing suits, but we don't care. We're both married. We know what men look like. You wear whatever you want. Knowing perfectly well what their wives would think about this. So anyway, so the day came and we made sure that we were in the pool a good 20 minutes before noon. Luckily, we didn't have 11 o'clock classes. And sure enough, the guys came in and they were wearing suits. But for a while thereafter, for several months thereafter, every once in a while, we'd hear the door from the men's locker room open and sort of a gasp and immediately close for the guy going back in. He hadn't gotten word.
Oh my gosh, to be a fly on the wall back then,
Yeah.
watching this.
My goodness.
What a story.
right.
Was this when the swimming pool was like underneath the rosé or whatever that
Yeah,
it was there?
Walker. Or
Okay.
Emeritus.
So now
I believe it's
it's-
still there. People have told, I mean, it's not full of water. I haven't checked this out myself. And granted, when I last heard this was several years back, and I haven't felt like, going to verify it myself. But
I've heard about this pool that is not full of water. I think it is still there.
Wow. I didn't realize the things you learn. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. So you had of course, you had a long and successful career in the ECE department at Michigan Tech. And in the middle of your time there, and I don't know, maybe people know this or not, but you became president of the IEEE. So, and in fact, you were the first woman president of the IEEE. So that's a feather in the cap for Michigan Tech to begin with, and obviously a feather in the cap for you. Can you tell us about that experience and maybe start by talking about what IEEE is, just so everyone knows, and then how you came to be president of IEEE and some of the things you did in that office?
okay, well, IEEE stands for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, and so it's like the Major Electrical Engineers Association. It also claims to be in. There's a Russian society that disputes this, but we won't go there. To be the largest professional technical society in the world. And I got involved with it soon after I got started at Tech. I mean, I've been a student member, and as soon as I became faculty, I became a faculty member. And I was invited to a meeting of Region 4, which is the region that we are in the United States, by a professor at Iowa who just, I think he was pro-woman, and he introduced me to some people. And through another route, I was the subject of my PhD dissertation had, thanks to my advisor, met with some interest in a subgroup of the IEEE called the IEEE Computer Society, which was the biggest technical subgroup, being about 1/3 the size of the IEEE. At any rate, so I got involved first with them, and then another guy who was chair, I guess he was chair of the board of directors, and he appointed me ex officio to the board of directors. So again, I was the only woman in the room because, of course, the rest were men. And the next time around, I got nominated and ran for the board of directors. And then I went through some of the officers and finally became president of the Computer Society. And that launched me, because most of the presidents of the Computer Society go on to be on the IEEE board. That put me on the IEEE board. And I went through some officers there and finally became president of the whole institute.
What year was that about?
You would ask. I have it on my license plate. It says IEEE whatever. I think, yeah, IEEE 93. That seems to roll off my tongue.
93.
So basically not about them.
Nice.
And that's a 1-year appointment, right? And
Yeah, well, it's called a 1-year appointment, but there is what they call the 3 Ps, which are
right.
the president-elect, the president, and the past president. And that, I think, is a wise tradition, and it gives a continuity. And when major problems occur, the 3 Ps have the first or cut at it, and really the final decision of, for example, personnel matters. During the time I was past president, we decided to fire the general manager of the IEEE, and I was the past president. I got the honors of calling him up and telling him that we were firing him. So anyway, it's not all sunlight and roses.
Right. Well, when you had to give that up and you just had to come back to, our little university, was it a relief, or did you miss all the hustle and bustle of being in this national organization for that period of time?
Well, maybe I will go back to something you said a little early in introducing it, that it was good for Michigan Tech. My being the first woman president of IEEE made the front page of the Wall Street Journal above the fold, with Michigan Tech prominently mentioned. So that, didn't hurt at all.
Mm-hmm.
There's a phase out, because traditionally the president of the IEEE goes on to chair certain special committees, and that rolled on for another something like 8 years. And at that point, I had a growing family and so forth. I really didn't regret that came to an end.
Very good. Well, let's fast forward one more time, and I'll ask, what have you been enjoying in your retirement?
Okay. Well, I had just mentioned memoirs. I've been taking classes on. The very first thing I did, it occurred to me that I couldn't go from the full kind of life that I had at Tech, and when I retired, I was president of the faculty of the University Senate. Everybody calls the faculty Senate. And in addition to doing regular faculty, I couldn't go from that kind of life immediately to having more lunches with ladies and playing more games of bridge. So I had figured out what I wanted to do. And what I wanted to do was get a master's degree in military history, because military history has always interested me. And so I found an online 2-year program leading to a master's in military history. And that was about right. I mean, that I was taking 2 courses a term, and that meant most every morning when I woke up, I had some questions to answer or a paper to work on or something. And by the time the 2 years was over, I was ready to just take a more relaxed life.
So you earned 1 bachelor's, 2 or 3 master's degrees? 3.
3,
3 master's degrees and 1 PhD.
yes.
Wow.
Well, I'm a perpetual student. I like being a student.
Yeah.
And that's why I mentioned memoirs. Well, I'm taking online classes now that are not degree oriented, including this one in memoirs that hopefully going to get me to really get serious about writing memoirs. The teacher from it, who was a Stanford professor but was doing it independently, said that if I could get him a manuscript, he would help me get it published. So this is nice, but I find days go by and I don't contribute. But hopefully I'll get my act in order and do something like that.
Well, let's see. We got a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Should we take a couple of those? We have a number of people who have reminded us but from the pool story that it was in the basement of something called Sherman Gym. Does that ring a bell?
That's right. I stand corrected on that.
And it was also, a training area for the 1968, or someone training for the 1968 Olympics was actually working in there in kayaking, and that Tech had a swim team at the time.
Yeah, that I don't think I even heard. I mean, I came in '69 and I wasn't wired into everything right away. So,
Warren Solomon would like you to talk for a minute about your PhD thesis.
Oh, okay. Well, I indicated that I wanted to shortcut the PhD. When I decided to go back for it, I spent a year looking at how I could get through as fast as possible. And I started with the Big Ten schools, thinking, that'd be particularly the nearer ones I could go and commute back home monthly or whatever. But that didn't work. And then the third master's that I got was a master's in education, which I got in Germany from the University of Southern California in Germany with regular USC faculty. And that was at the time that I was teaching secondary ed. And the military there wanted a program for their retiring officers. And they figured that with their leadership skills, if they went into education, they would very soon find themselves as principals and superintendents. At any rate, so they arranged for USC to give this master's degree on an Air Force base that was about 20 miles away from where I lived. So I picked that up. So I had a credential in education. So anyway, nothing seemed to, all the Big Ten schools wanted me on campus for 2 years. And that was just more time than so I started and I went back to Stanford where I at least knew people and so forth. And the same thing, if I got a PhD in electrical engineering from Stanford, they wanted me on campus for 2 years. I could do my research back here, but I wandered over to the ed school and talked to them. They said, we see what you're trying to do here, but if you come to us in the summer, because in education, the courses taught are much heavier in the summer. It's just because teachers that can't. Anyway, if you come here for I think 3 summers and 1 school year, so I took 71, 72, and did my residency. Came back and did and what it was there was an NSF program at that time that like an important, very colorful faculty in the Stanford Electronics Department was involved in, called COSIGN. At that, NSF felt that electrical engineering departments were still sticking to the old standard stuff, and they felt that the electrical engineering departments needed to be introducing more computer courses. So this COSIGN committee was an NSF-funded project to get more computer content. Anyway, so Ed McCluskey was a Stanford professor on that. And anyway, my PhD thesis was the impact of the cosign committee on electrical engineering education. So I don't remember the whole years and so forth, but its work had basically been done. And I, through a series of different kinds of measures, did a sample of electrical engineering departments across the country to evaluate what impact the cosign committee had had. And that turned out to be very popular subject. And that's what got me started in the Computer Society, because the head of an influential had heard from Ed McCluskey about what a neat job I had done or whatever. And so yeah, one thing sometimes leads to another.
Yeah. No, thanks for adjusting your head. If you can adjust it a
Yeah.
little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it ended up that my PhD was a major in education and a minor in electrical engineering, because I have fulfilled everything to do that. And I'm pretty sure that that's the one and only degree like that Stanford's ever given. But I got advice on it. Some people said, well, it's important. It's in electrical engineering, and other people said, once you have the PhD, you have a PhD, and it doesn't matter what the heck it is in. So, and so far as I know, I was never significantly handicapped by not having a pure, just plain PhD.
Well, I think your career has shown you were not handicapped. Martha, see if you can tilt your screen a little bit so we can see a little more of your head. Great.
Oh,
Right,
okay,
there.
sorry.
There
I
we go.
inadvertently let it slip.
Yeah, we're looking at your ceiling there for a while.
Yeah.
Very good. Let's see. Well, just a couple of other things from the Q&A. A lot of these are just comments, sort of thanking you for everything you've done. David Brooks says, I remember working through the first draft of your logic book, and we got extra points if we found errors.
Oh, that's right. Yep. I gave, after I'd done my thesis and discovered, I guess I'd always known I like to write, I started writing textbooks and used the raw notes for the students, which is the way I had learned at Stanford. I mean, a good third of the classes I took as an undergraduate were done from professor's notes rather than from a textbook. And I don't know. Yeah, I think I probably picked up the extra point trick there too.
So how many textbooks have you written, Martha? About
2 for sure. It's all back now. Buddy passed, and one went into a second edition. The most recent one is never going to go into it's called mini computers and microcomputers, and both of those terms were obsolete not that long after I had written the book, but enough so the sales put my kids through college, so I can't complain.
lots of people are just curious about different parts of your career. Marcia would like to know how old you were when you worked on your degree in military history.
Well, if we're saying 93, no, that was the year I was president. So the question was,
Well, you would just retired.
probably in my 60s.
Yeah. So there's hope for us. You know, our brains can still work in our 60s.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm still taking courses in my 80s. I've got 2 that are starting later this spring.
What are you taking this spring?
Oh, okay. One of them probably was because it's a weekend course and it's not graded, but it's on improving your cognitive skills as you age or keeping them. And the other one I haven't for sure registered for. That I have to think that they will be starting next month. I'm still looking at a couple of choices. One is a military history thing, again from Stanford, and then they have some courses that are more practical, like how to improve your writing and so forth.
Mhm.
But the point is that there are a lot of these things out here, and I like to have a little bit of structure in my life or in my intellectual life.
This is an advice question. What advice would you offer to high school students who have an interest in electrical engineering or computer science or computer engineering? What should they do best to prepare to be accepted into our next entering class? What
Oh,
advice?
well, certainly work hard on take all the math classes they can, all the physics classes that they can, do well at it, seek out activities. There's so many activities at the high school level now, like in things like robotics, where there are teams, and you get the benefit of teamwork in addition to learning things. Just see what's in your area and do advanced placement courses, which again was not something that I had the opportunity for.
Well, and just a natural curiosity about your family. I know you have grandchildren. So how many children did you have, and are any of them engineers, and what about into the next generation?
Okay. Well, I had two children, a daughter and a son from my two marriages. And the kids are 11 years apart, and now the grandchildren are 16 years apart. And I have 6 grandchildren. My daughter's children they would like to think they're off the family payroll. I mean, my daughter and her husband have all gone medically. 2 of them are currently medical students. One's a 4th year and one's a 1st year. And the other one got a master's in public health and is doing studies of comorbidities. And okay, and then my son's kids they're born in 2008, 10, and 12, so they are still basically elementary, middle school. One of them, the youngest, looks like he may want to be some natural scientist. A couple of years ago, when he was up here for the summer, we took him to see the Mineral Museum, and he loved it. We had to drag him away, and we asked him what he wanted to do the next day, and he wanted to go back to see the Mineral Museum. But other than that, there's my oldest grandson there. His dad says math comes really easy to him, but he doesn't like it. Now, maybe he still hasn't run into any kind of math that would arouse his interest, but we'll just have to, the jury is out on that one.
I always tell students, you don't have to love math, you just need to be able to do math, and it is good if you get some satisfaction when you solve the math problem and you're, like the answer matches at the back of the book. When you get satisfaction from solving math problems, that's good, but that does not mean you have to love it.
Mhm.
Yeah, I just realized I didn't answer what my kids did, and whether either of them went into engineering. My daughter is a lawyer. In fact, she's a law school professor. And she had wanted to be a lawyer since she was about 7 years old. So the only question was, what did she major in as an undergraduate? Well, she majored in computer science, which I still think is because her boyfriend, her senior year in high school, who was a tech student, was majoring in computer science. I may be wrong on this. Anyway, it is a fact that she majored in computer science. My son went to the Naval Academy and majored in systems engineering, which is a program that's not offered with that title very many places in the country, but it is basically a branch of electrical engineering. So both of them stuck pretty close to my technical interests, at least in their education.
So Raymond Hicks is saying that he remembers a class that you taught in the early 70s that used a book on the DEC PDP-11 computer. And he wanted to know, does that sound right? What class was that? And he was there from 71 to 75, and he went on to a development career with IBM in Minnesota. and he says it's great to see you again, as do
Okay,
many of the
well,
people.
I remember him, so hi. Tell me the name of the book again. I don't,
He said, I remember using a book on the DEC PDP-11 computer.
okay. Yeah, uh, that's right. That, I forget who was giving those away. There was a program probably shepherded through NSF, where they were going to give away a whole bunch of PDP-11s, but there was a catch to it. They would only give it if a faculty member went to like a 2-week free class to learn how to use it. And so I volunteered to take one for the team, and I went out to LA, and it wasn't. It turned out my brother was living there at the time, so it was part vacation, part family too. And I made some really good connections, including with Mac van Valkenburg, who you probably recognize, and who was very influential in my career. And so I brought that back, and Tech used it for a while, and then it shortly became basically, I mean, the better things, easier to use things that you didn't have to program in hexadecimal came along. And I don't know, but probably got thrown out at some point before you came, long before you came.
Leonard Bowman, who we both know very well, has
Okay.
asked if you could talk about some of the interesting places you've traveled to during your career.
Okay, well, Antarctica immediately comes to mind. In fact, the timing of my retirement was based on a particular trip to Antarctica sponsored by Stanford that I really wanted to go to. And it came up suddenly before a Christmas vacation. And I remember there's this RSVP program where you have to give a year's notice because Tech had gotten tired of people walking in August saying, I'm retiring now, right on the spot. And at any rate, the timing to get the approval of my retirement and what have you during Christmas vacation was something. But that was a wonderful experience. I mean, Antarctica is just really special. Other than that, I'm very fond of Australia and New Zealand, and to the far north. I seem to gravitate to either the far north or the very far south.
Well, there's some people curious about the military history and whether it covered ancient Greek military, and they just want to know more about your military history degree.
Well, there were a whole bunch of classes, the school that taught that had a long history in military history. I mean, they had a very, very strong program, and also had a long history in doing courses online, so they knew how to do it. But it was a fairly straightforward. We didn't spend much time back in the Greeks and Romans days. I mean, we got up to things like Napoleon and then into the 2 world wars and the Vietnam War. I was mainly interested in World War II in the Pacific because my dad had been over there. In fact, he'd been on Iwo Jima.
Wow.
So that was my interest. And if you asked me to talk about any given Greek war, I wouldn't be able to do anything on the spot.
Well, and there's just some people who vividly remember you. So Michael attended MTU in 77 to 79, earning his BS-EE degree. So his last name is Ager. He clearly remembers you, who he had for several classes. He highly regards you in his mind, and it's great to see you doing so well. And then
Well,
Mark, yeah. Well, I mean, you've made a difference in the world, Martha. So Mark Hartramp just wanted to say thank you to Martha for your contributions. He attended several undergrad courses in the 73 to 77 timeframe.
True.
And you've had an influence on colleagues as well as students. So John Soper says hello.
Hi, John.
He's here. He says, I really enjoyed hearing about your career and also enjoyed working with you, and he wishes you well in your retirement.
John was a wonderful person, so easy to get along with. He was sort of the soother of the department if there were interpersonal problems.
Well, there's a lot of barriers that have been broken. John points out during the early 70s, there were no female students in his EE classes, and Martha Sloan was the only female faculty member. So somebody's got to be the first, and we're awfully glad you were there to do that, Martha.
Okay. Well, I was the first for a few years, and then all of a sudden they sort of sprouted up, and there was one point where there was the blonde and the brunette, and I was brunette, and then we had that one. The blonde came because her husband came in as head of mathematics, and she was looking for a job, and we were sort of faculty, and we hired her, and there was some skepticism and so forth, but because she did not have any degrees in electrical engineering, but she too had I believe a PhD in math, and we just shoved her in the direction of the more mathematical ones. And then over the years, at one point we had a white, a black, and an Asian, but we didn't advertise it that way. And they both subsequently left, and I still, in fact, I just got an email today from one of them that has left to go to somewhere in Tennessee.
Well, and we're starting to wind down on the questions. So I was going to ask you guys to give some summary remarks, starting with Dan and then closing with you, Martha. But before I asked you to do that, Sue Hill, I wanted to point out that Kay had said there aren't any appointments for next week for Husky Bites. He doesn't, and that person doesn't see any appointments for Husky Bites between March 14th and April 4th. So I'm just going to say a little bit about the menu, and just please contact engineering@mtu.edu if you have any questions. So next week we have a break. It is spring break, even though it's still snowing, it is spring break next week. The following week, March 14th, we'll be talking about, we'll be hearing about how we make vaccines. And the faculty member will be Dr. Karen Helt, who is a chemical engineering faculty member. And that'll be really good. She'll probably weave in the story of how Michigan Tech, how she helped Michigan Tech develop a on-campus PCR testing facility during the summer of the pandemic of 2020. So with that, I first of all want to thank everyone for joining us for Husky Bites, and then I'm gonna, Dan, let's have some last words from you, and then Martha, you're going to close us out.
Very good, and thank you, Janet, for organizing this, and thank you for giving Martha the last word. So I because other than what I said at the very beginning, which was what a voice of experience and reason that Martha has been for Michigan Tech and for me personally over the years, I don't have much to add to that other than to say, Martha, thank you for everything you've done. Thank you for everything you've done for the profession. Thank you for everything you've done for our students and for Michigan Tech. And it's been great knowing you for these last 14 years. And like everyone else who's on the call tonight, I certainly wish you all the best, and I hope to stay in touch with you for many years to come. And with that, I'll turn it over to you for the last word.
Well, thank you, Dan, for your kind remarks and such. And it's certainly been a pleasure knowing you and knowing Michigan Tech. And I'm grateful to everything that Michigan Tech did and allowed me to do. For example, the year that I was president of IEEE was a very difficult year personally because of my husband basically being hospitalized the entire year, and I couldn't afford to take a sabbatical, but tech basically carried me for a year without my teaching courses and so forth. And I've always been grateful to that and grateful to the opportunities they have offered me. And this has been a lot of fun tonight. I thank you, Janet, for the idea. This has been great fun. I'm looking forward to getting the recording, which I will shoot out to everybody I know that might not have been able to be one of the, now I see 149 participants to this seminar.
Yes.
149, my
Yeah,
goodness.
you had terrific attendance. It was actually 175 at one point. Well, and so tomorrow is the beginning of Women's History Month, and it's been really wonderful to hear directly from a legend. One of the comments out there was, "I didn't have you for a class, but I heard about you." All right, with that, I want to say good evening to everybody. Thank you so much. See you March 14th. We are taking next week off.